Right, I think we are now live. Good morning, members, and officers and any members of the public who are viewing this live stream, this meeting. Welcome to the meeting of the Civic Affairs Committee. My name is, there we are. We are joined by Councillor Mills. Good. My name is Councillor Peter Fane. I'm chairing this meeting of the Civic Affairs Committee. For the information of members of the public, our committee is responsible for reviewing the Constitution, for electoral arrangements, and for promoting and maintaining ethical standards. Now, may I start with a few housekeeping announcements? This will be familiar to members, I'm sure, but just a reminder that everything on your desk, including your laptop screen, may be broadcast at some point because the camera follows the microphone being switched on. So councillors and officers are advised to wait a couple of seconds before speaking to allow the camera to catch up. For those participating via the live stream, as usual, indicate you want to speak via the chat column. I'm not going to read out the rest of this. I think it is familiar to us all how the system works now. So I can confirm that this meeting is quorate. If at any time a member leaves the meeting, would they please make that fact known to me so that we can record it in the minutes? That is not a target. I haven't been asked to do this, but I am going to, just for the record, ask members to record their presence today. So I'm Peter Fane. We don't have a vice chair because sadly Councillor Paul Bearpark had a bereavement last week. I've sent my personal condolences to him, but I suppose we ought to have a vice chair for this meeting. Do I have any volunteers to take on the role of vice chair from either side of the chamber, as it were? Councillor Martin Khan. That's what I call a volunteer.
But you need a
yes, would somebody like to propose?
Seconder,
in the thank you, leader. Seconder, affirmation. I think we're all agreed on that. Thank you, Councillor Khan. And as I say, I'm going to just go around the meeting, members, ask you to just briefly introduce yourselves before we progress to the business. So, Councillor, well, I'll give Councillor Khan a moment or two to get registered. Perhaps we'll go around this way. Councillor Henry Batchelor.
Morning, Chair. Councillor Henry Batchelor, one of the members for the Linton Ward.
Hardly any introduction needed, but...
Councillor Bridget Smith, member for Gamlingay.
Can I use your microphone, please? Councillor Susan Van de Ven, member for Bassingbourn and Lidlington. And apologies, Chair, because I won't be able to stay very long at all today.
We understand that you have other obligations, so thank you for joining us, if only briefly.
Good morning, Chair. Councillor Lina Nieto, member for Hardwick and Toft.
Welcome to all. And we have, as usual, support from Andrew Francis and from our monitoring officer, and Patrick is the member of Democratic Services looking after us today. And I think we're joined online by one councillor. Right. Councillor Brown.
Yes.
Welcome.
Good morning.
Right, let's
be here with you. Thank you.
Business. Patrick, do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Paul Bearpark, and also Councillor Heather Williams said she will be late, but she will be attending.
Okay, she will be joining us. Good. Do any members have any interest to declare in relation to any of the items of business on the agenda? I see none. No. Good. Obviously, if any interest subsequently becomes apparent later in the meeting, please would you raise it at that point. Now, I believe members have had circulated the minutes of our last meeting on 12th of September. Has everyone got those minutes? Can I, any particular corrections needed on those minutes, or can I take those as approved minutes? Can we have a proposal? Seconder, thank you, Councillor Batchelor.
I'll second.
Affirmation, can we take?
Yeah.
Thank you, right. Those minutes stand approved. Anyone want to vote against that? No, I don't think so. So the main business, starting item 4, the review of polling districts and polling places for 2023-24. So may I ask Andrew Francis to present his report, which I think we all have attached at page 7 onwards. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. You'll recall at the September Civic Affairs Committee meeting, we talked about kicking off our review of polling districts and polling places, which is a statutory requirement that every council in the country is going to have to complete within basically the next 16 months. So the committee agreed that we could open consultation, and that consultation took place over October and November. The report you've got in your pack summarises the responses that we received from interested parties, and it offers some recommendations that the committee can make to council to update our schedule of polling districts and polling places. I'm happy to run through quickly for members what those changes are. So firstly, we proposed to split Camborne into 4 polling districts, and that's to make, historically we've always sent everybody in Camborne to the hub to vote, and we changed that over COVID, and now we're bringing the register in line with the practice that we'd already started doing. It needed to happen anyway because there were too many people voting in one place, so that's splitting the register into 4 different polling districts along the Greater, Upper, Lower and West Camborne areas. We've deleted an area in Willingham which was required due to a community governance review that took place a few years ago and resulted in a mismatch of boundaries. So that's purely an administrative thing, and where no one in that small polling district will notice any difference when they come to voting. We've confirmed arrangements for polling district RA2, which is part of Fenditton, just to confirm that we're going to be putting a polling station in Marley from now on. We updated the polling place for OA3, which is Impington South. We call it Impington South. It's actually the part of, I think they call it Kings Meadow in the area. It's over the King's Hedges Road from Orchard Park. Unfortunately, the City Council demolished the Meadows Community Centre, rebuilt it over the boundary in the city, so we just had to update our polling district scheme to reflect that people will be treading over the boundary just about to go into the City Council area to vote, but it's still, to all intents and purposes, the same polling station. And thanks to Councillor Garvey, who rightly pointed out that I should have put something in about Eddington and didn't. So we created something that wasn't in the proposals, and that's a new polling district for our part of Eddington. So I'm sure members are aware that Eddington is sort of bisected by the City Council or District Council boundary. So part of Eddington falls in South Cambridgeshire. And it was right that we created a polling district for Eddington, so we've done that now in this proposal anyway. So hopefully you'll agree that we can recommend that to Council for adoption in February.
Where does that appear in our list, please?
It's the third appendix, so Appendix C, which gives you a map of what we're proposing to adopt as the boundary for that new polling district. It isn't just for Eddington. Obviously, when you have an area like Eddington, which is partly in South Cambridgeshire and partly in Cambridge City, we have to think carefully about what the best way of dealing with that is, and it would have been quite difficult, sort of pointless, in my opinion, to create a small polling district just for Eddington. So what we've actually suggested is that we draw the polling district boundary along the A14, so that actually encompasses parts of Girton Parish, which are south of the A14, so the areas around Welbrook Way, that sort of area, and we'll put in place a polling station for that whole polling district, which will be more accessible for everybody in Eddington and in the part of Girton that's south of the A14. Sorry if I'm getting a bit too local for everybody here. I don't know.
We need to know.
But that, yeah, there's a proposed polling district boundary there. The other thing that would have been difficult is if we were to have a narrow polling district just for Eddington and not to include the other parts of Girton, is that we probably would have had to send them to the same polling station that the City Council will be sending their electors to in Eddington, which is not really good practice, and we ought to be trying to avoid really if we can do so. That's why I think this is the best option. And thanks to Councillor Garvey for raising this with me, and I'm a bit annoyed I hadn't. We talked about this in the team and then I neglected to include it, so apologies to everyone for that. I have talked to Councillor Garvey and Councillor Stobart about this, and they both offered their support for the proposed boundary for this polling district. So that's really it in a nutshell, in terms of what we're trying to take forward. I think all of these changes will either be unnoticed by residents if they're administrative in nature, or they'll improve things, I think. So hopefully members feel happy to make these recommendations to council. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Khan.
Well, I've written to you yesterday. First of all, to say that I'm happy about the movement of Kings Meadow polling district to the new community centre. It's in my ward, so the fact that it's in the city is a matter of a few metres, so it's not really a concern. I did raise the issue of the part of Milton Parish which is detached, Fen Road, Chesterton, which is votes, as I understand it, in the community centre in Milton. That was quite a way. It's awkward. You've got to go through a large area of the city or by footpath along the canal the river towpath. And it's an area which is of people, or generally it's not a very prosperous area. It's many people living in mobile homes. So I think that's quite a disincentive to actually voting. And it would be very much more desirable if you could have a polling station close in the area, or even perhaps just over the area in the city, but more accessible, would be much more accessible to the area. You said that it was difficult. Is it possible to review that to see if a new polling station could be provided somewhere more accessible to them? Not necessarily in the thing, but close by.
Andy.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Khan. The first thing I'd say, for the purposes of this review, Milton Detached, it's OC2 in our polling district scheme. It's identified as a separate polling district, and I think no one's suggesting that should change. It should be separate because it is quite, it's detached. It's quite unusual, really, detached from the rest of the parish that it sits within. So that's fine as it is in that respect. I would give some assurance to Councillor Khan and to the rest of the committee that we've looked at this a few times I've been here a long time now, so we've looked at it a few times over the years, and it's always proved quite difficult to find a suitable location. But you'll notice in the report, and I didn't mention it, maybe I should have done, that we've already said, in response to a few electors who raise individual concerns, that we'll take a few of those areas away and keep them under review over the next period, and I'm happy to do the same with that. So it's been a few years since we've looked at it, and there are a few businesses down that area that might be amenable to us. I mean, one of the big problems is it's a narrow road with no easily hireable buildings, and that always puts us in a difficult position. So, but very happy to accompany that with what I've said. Actually, you might be interested in about Histon and Impington. One resident raised their an issue with our voting arrangements in there. So I've said to them that we're happy to review that over the next year, along with actually Gambling Day as well, because somebody raised that. So happy to include OC2 in that as well, and see if we can improve things. So I totally agree with you, Councillor Khan, that the current situation is less than ideal, and I'm happy to take that away and see what we can do. I hope that's okay.
Did you have any further responses to the Appendix B suggestions, including from Councillor Graham Cohn, in relation to for instance, the temporary caravan? What's the situation on that now?
Yeah, so Fulbourn Beechwood is the area of Fulbourn Parish, which is abuts Cherry Hinton. It's where the Fulbourn Tesco's is, and our polling station at the moment is sited in the car park of Fulbourn Tesco's, which, on the face of it sounds unsatisfactory. But if you go out to Fulbourn Beechwood, and you walk, and my team won't thank me for it, but I asked them to go out to Fulbourn Beechwood and walk from where people live to the car park in Tesco's. It's far more accessible than any of the alternatives in that polling district at the moment. So there is a sort of sports and social club which has been newly built around the I think it's called Vision Park. I can't remember off the top of my head, the business park area. But it's a really long walk, and I'm not keen on making people walk. For exactly the reasons that Councillor Dr. Khan just mentioned. Really, don't want people to walk a really long way. We keep all of these things under. It's not always visible. I appreciate that. We keep all of these areas under review, especially the ones that have unusual polling arrangements. And we always want to do the best we can for residents. And if any option comes that is, I don't know, more secure or more safe, because safety is one of the biggest concerns in the car park, frankly. How do we keep people safe? How do we set up our polling station in that car park to ensure that no one's put at risk because it is in a car park? We work really hard to make sure that happens. But we're always open to change, and as things develop in that area, then we'll keep that under review, and if we can do better, we will do better. And we always ask people to send us, if they've got options, send them to us where we have to look at them.
And we're happy to continue using a caravan lent by a parishioner.
Yeah, well, they're not really let by, they're not.
Okay.
I'm not throwing my caravanners under the bus or anything here, but we pay for their caravans, so they are hired, and they're not sort of voluntarily offered. And in fact, the one that we use in Fulbourn Tesco's now is a mobile library, actually, which we rent from the county council. So we now use a mixture of, I think, 3 or 4 caravans and a couple of mobile libraries, which we're trying to use. The county council get a little bit of money out of it, and they like have a bit of visibility, and it works. It's not. I'm not going to pretend it's perfect. It isn't.
Some of these slightly more secure arrangement.
Well, and
suggestion by the parish council.
And
a caravan lent by a parishioner.
Yeah, it's not. It isn't that. And to be frank, the alternative when you talk about mobile polling stations is you start talking about porta cabins, which come in at £3,000 plus, and you need a site to put them on as well. So, not keen to go down that route unless we really have to. It might be at some point in the future we do have to, but that's not where I want to end up really.
And what was your response to Gamlingay Parish Council suggesting that they might need more than one polling station in Gamlingay?
So there is already more than one polling station in Gamlingay. It's just they're hosted in the same building. So that is something that I think maybe isn't obvious. Again, not obvious to people from the outside. As soon as you go into a polling station and you're asked to split off by which road you live in, that immediately will tell you there are 2 different polling stations operating in that building. So that's for the purposes of making things quicker. Again, if we start looking at those sorts of things, then that opens up actually, frankly, the whole district, and all of a sudden we'd end up with 250 polling stations instead of 125, which is already quite a lot. So it's about a balancing act, what's accessible, and in truth, I'm not dismissing any of the input from anyone that came back to us. These are really the first times I've heard any of these things come up. So we'd need to do a bit more digging and work to figure out whether we think there's legs there or a better way of doing things. So, again, I've offered that we will keep all these things under review over the next year, see how we get on.
Okay. And we're joined by Councillor Heather Williams. Did you want to comment on this, Councillor Williams?
Thank you. Yes, just in relation to Tadlow, which I think is the only polling district where it's actually in somebody's house, because there isn't anything. That house was up for sale at some point, and there's potentially a change of ownership. Just checking you've checked back in with them, and that we're still all good to go. If not, the church may be finished soon.
Yeah, we used to have a second one in Conington, and we moved away from that to the pub, which I think works better. In Tadlow, I'd need to touch base with my team, but I think we've booked them for the 2nd of May already, so I think that booking's already in place. Again, these sorts of situations really evolve over time. You can't really, you want it to happen that you can have a house that's suitable and the people that live in that house are happy to run the polling station. That's pretty unusual, and so yes, we need to start contingency planning for Tadlow, but I think we're all sorted for the 2nd of May. So, thanks.
So, in conclusion, it seems that there are some minor changes still to be made to the table. Councillor Milnes, sorry, Councillor Milnes, I missed you. Please.
Sorry, attending virtually has its own issues, doesn't it?
I think the screen
Anyway,
is too small for me to spot you, Councillor Mills. Yes.
I've been called now, so I'll speak. I just wanted to add another slightly parochial issue, Trumpington Meadows, and I'm sure Andy Francis is aware of that. It's another place where we've got the boundary, the city boundary, and South Cambs running through the middle of the development, and that development is being extended as we speak. And I just wondered whether he'd got that on his radar. Thank you.
So we have a dedicated polling station in South Trumpington, as we call it, which is at the school. But it's on my radar that the electorate in that polling district has grown really significantly, really quickly over the last couple of years. Yeah, on my radar already. And so I think it will still suffice in the school, but certainly aware that we need to keep that on our radar to make sure that what we are doing is fit for purpose, because some of these areas where we have a lot of growth, if you stand still, then they can all of a sudden not be fit for purpose anymore. So, but yeah, certainly on our radar, Councillor Mills.
I think I was particularly interested in understanding how the electorate were guided as to where to vote, because if city council elections, for example, coming up this time are in thirds, I don't know if there is an election in May there, but if we're having both councils being elected to, what happens? Does that polling station switch from being operated by the city? Perhaps you could just give me some guidance on that.
So we have a polling station in our district in South Trumpington, in Trumpington Meadows Primary School, and I don't, off the top of my head, know where Trumpington ward electors go to vote. I have to say I don't know, so I'm afraid that's a city council question and I don't know the answer, but it would definitely be a separate building to where our electors go, and their poll card hopefully makes it clear to them where they go to vote. I mean, there is always a risk on these city fringe areas that people go to the wrong polling station on polling day, and we have a dialogue with city council colleagues to make sure we can redirect people if that sort of crops up on the day. I don't think it does too much, to be honest, so hopefully not too much of an issue, but yeah, we'll keep it on ongoing.
Yeah, put it on your radar. Thank you.
Any other comments? Oh, yes. Councillor Carr.
Just simply wanting an update upon how information is going about the requirement for an ID, which will be obviously a matter for coming elections. I don't think we've had one yet, which you need to show one in South Cambridgeshire, so I'd be interested to know what preparations have been made.
So yeah, we haven't had an election with ID yet. We are ramping up the work we're doing to try and communicate that with electors, and hopefully everyone saw there was a full-page electoral commission advert in the South Cambs magazine that's hit doorsteps over the last few days, and I'm about to lobby the magazine members to do the same for our spring copy of the magazine, because I think it's really important that we need to try and shout about this as much as we can. We've sent large posters to all of, or maybe not all, but as many of the public buildings in our districts as we could think of, and many of the polling station venues that we could think of, anywhere that we're interested in. If members want any voter ID sort of advert posters, they can drop by our bank of desks and pick some up. We've got some that you can take. If you can think of places in your parishes where that might be helpful, really happy to do that. Hopefully early in the new year, some of our bin lorries are going to be carrying voter ID messaging on the side of them. So I'm really excited about that, and very happy to talk to any member that thinks of any ideas that we could try and cover, because we don't want people turning up in May without ID, so we're doing our best to try and get that message out there.
So you keep that separate from this. I've just come to Councillor Smith and then back to Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you very much. Since Gamlingay has been mentioned, the Eco Hub is the only fully accessible on a bus route venue with ample car parking. There simply isn't anywhere else. I'm not sure I'd waste resources keeping it under review. I've never, ever had a complaint in 16 years. And actually it's big enough, it means that people stay and they socialise afterwards because there's plenty of space for them to do so. The most important point that's been raised in the second appendices is about accessibility, and that and I realise that's quite challenging if we're using things like caravans. But as I say, that's the most important thing that I think we should be striving for full accessibility and disability compliance.
Just to be really clear, when we use caravan, we undertake polling in the awning, in an awning attached, so no one has to go into the caravan. It's all level access. The mobile libraries are a bit more challenging, but they do have lifts to help people get in, so they're all accessible, those mobile stations. And look, we spend a huge amount of time training our staff to try and help them support people with access to disability issues. We really want to exclude no one, as few people as possible.
Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. It was just in relation to the voter ID, but also postal votes applications and things like that are changing quite differently to make sure that if you're doing something in the magazine, that it covers postal vote changes as well.
Yeah, so the Elections Act continues to bring lots of change in the world of elections. And what Councillor Williams is talking about there is that over the last 3 weeks, it's become possible for people to apply for a postal vote online. So that's now, instead of a paper-based process, it's a web-based process, which is good. Opens it up for people, hopefully, but does still require people to take a photograph of their signature, which is not something that's totally easy for everybody. So again, more changes to overseas electors coming, and then after the elections next year, changes to the voting rights of EU citizens as well. So that's something that I will be coming to members to talk about, I think, later next year, to give you, maybe do a bit of a briefing on that, to go through some of these changes. But for us, a lot of change all at the same time, especially with the uncertainty of when a general election will be as well. All of that's stacking up at the moment. So,
So, Councillor Williams, there will be some further changes and a further update at a future date to this committee, but let's not go too much into that today. Councillor Nieto.
Chair, I just wanted to ask, I'm imagining that the comms team is working with you on that, because it's a big thing. One of the things is sharing all the information with members so that we can push out to residents. But it is a big thing, and I'm hoping that there'll be a comms plan on that.
Yeah. So we have a member of my team who part of her role is to try and engage with communities, and so we do lots of work in care homes. We do lots of work with students. So we've attended Freshers' Fairs at CRC and at Girton College this year. If any members have ideas that they think we could get into or do better, then I'm really happy to hear them. Always happy to hear them. And part of what Beth does in my team is works really closely with the comms team to try and get those messages out. So yeah, any ideas, I'm always open to hearing them. Really, really happy to talk about that.
Right. Well, Andy, thank you for that and for the recommendation. Just before I put this to the committee for approval or otherwise, can we just check that it is Appendix A which you need approval, or is it the whole report?
Yeah, Appendix A reflects all the changes that I've talked about. So that is what I would need the committee to recommend adoption to council. As we talked about loads, council only is responsible for polling districts and polling places. So they're the bit we need to nail down. If we say we'll keep polling stations under review, then we can do that outside of the adoption process. So there's no issue with that. So no, as long as so the committee can recommend to council adoption of Appendix A as our new scheme.
The reason I asked about where Eddington is earlier is I couldn't see that change reflected in Appendix A. Have I missed it?
If I point you to, because it's listed by ward,
Yes.
Councillor Payne, look at Girton. We've called it QD2, Eddington and Girton South.
Okay, so it is.
It is in that list, yeah.
Right.
Thanks.
So, can I have a proposal that we approve Appendix A? Councillor Henry Batchelor. Somebody like to second that proposal? Councillor Bridget Smith. Are we all in favour?
Agreed.
Are we all in favour? Right. I think we can take that by affirmation. Anyone against? Right. The committee therefore recommends to council that it adopts the revised schedule as set out in Appendix A. So we come to item 5, which is the independent member of the Audit and Corporate Governance Committee. And this has come to us from that committee. Before we get into discussion, may I ask Jonathan Tully to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, committee. It's nice to be back. So this is a follow-up report on appointing an independent member to the Audit and Corporate Governance Committee, as that is best practice. If I can direct you to page 23 of your agenda packs, it highlights in the first few paragraphs in the executive summary the sort of journey so far. We've taken it to Audit and Corporate Governance Committee, then it came to Civic Affairs, and it went to full council, where it was approved, but with the amendment that we need to define a resident of Cambridgeshire for the purposes of the change to the Constitution. So this report really sort of details that work, and it would then going on to page 24. I suppose the key commentary here is that we've looked online and there is no one single definition of residence. We've highlighted some of the more common ones in paragraph 16. So this does give us some flexibility to define our own definition of residence, and we've proposed that in paragraph 17, that it is a person who lives or has their home in Cambridgeshire. So that gives us a few options to agree our definition, as was asked by the council, that officers propose the term for residence, or for the committee to propose a different definition. And then that enables us to proceed with the recommendations, which are the same as before, just with now defined residence. So that's really all I have to say introducing the report.
Thank you, Jonathan. And I would stress that we have already discussed this matter both at this committee and at council. Councillor Bridget Smith. Yes, please.
So I appreciate, I understand that, agreeing that definition is the main thing we're being asked to do today. And I understand that the recommendation has come from the Audit and Corporate Governance Committee, which is a statutory body, their recommendation has to be accepted. But my understanding is that best practice is considered to be 2 independent members, I think, with voting rights. So, will this committee request that the Audit and Corporate Governance Committee, in 12 months' time perhaps, review their recommendation to hopefully bring us in line with best practice? Because I'm disappointed that we're not adhering to best practice here. I think that was a missed opportunity. But I don't know, is it the place of this committee to request that is reviewed in 12 months' time by the other committee?
There's no reason why this committee shouldn't recommend what it likes, but the recommendation before us today, which has been through council, is to make a start on that process and to move towards best practice, not to necessarily meet best practice at this stage. So perhaps we could come back later to whether we need to formally recommend that. I think the Audit and Governance Committee are very well aware of that requirement, and I suspect we'll come back to it, but I can't speak to them. Councillor Heather Williams.
I'm a member of the Audit and Corporate Governance Committee, just for clarity. Obviously, the decision actually goes to full council, and it gets voted on in full council, and that's why so every member gets an opportunity at that point. In relation to page 23, it refers to Appendix C, and when we go through the papers of the report, we've got Appendix A and B, unless there's been a supplement that I've not been able to find. So I think that's just the wrong... I think it's the wrong letter, but given that's the recommendation, Chair, I felt we should make sure that the recommendation that we were voting on was accurate. Thank you.
I'm sure we had all noticed that.
If not, happy to go to a vote,
Thank
Chair.
you, Councillor Williams. So the changes to Constitution, as you say, are included in Appendix B. Right. Any further comments from members of the committee? Councillor Mill has his hand up. Councillor Mill.
So sorry, a residual hand, Chair.
No. Right, so Again, the committee is being asked to accept the recommended definition. I think that is the only change here, which is at paragraph 17, and to recommend the report itself to council. So this would allow the appointment of an independent member of the audit committee, noting that they should not have voting rights, they should be a resident of Cambridgeshire, and that the recruitment process be delegated to the audit committee working with officers. Yes.
I have a query in terms of this definition. The definition says a person who lives or has their home in a place. Does that allow somebody to have a second home? Is it a major home? I just wondered how that would apply, because there's a certain ambiguity. You don't know whether it's their main home or whether it's any home.
Yes. I'm aware that officers have been through a lot of different variations on this in order to come to this definition, but perhaps we could ask Jonathan to comment on that, how this would apply in the case of second homes.
I think really it's up for this committee to decide, really. Oh, sorry. Apologies, thank you. I turned it off. Ultimately, it's up to this committee to decide, really. I think we wrote it, probably with reference to the prime home, but it's open for debate. Yeah.
Yes. As written, my understanding is that this would not prevent somebody whose home in this, because in Cambridgeshire is a second home, from being selected. And I'm not sure there's any particular reason to change that. Was that a proposal that this be changed, Councillor Khan?
No, I just wanted information. I mean, I would accept that perfectly happily, that it could be the second home. The important point is that the reason why it's proposed is that somebody has knowledge of the area and they can have knowledge of the area to have a second home. So I don't think I wanted to know for clarity purposes.
Okay, but before we go to the recommendation, let me take advice from our legal officer on this.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Having worked with Jonathan on this report, I'd like to thank you for his hard work. I think the view that the officers took was that whatever definition Jonathan put in his report, there would always be somebody that would have an argument to say, yes, but can I see clarification? The view we took was, I think officers have tried to be pragmatic here, in that there is going to be a recruitment process which will be officer-led, but working hand in glove with the chair of audit. And the pragmatic view we took was, let us get a simple, short definition in and allow those undertaking the recruitment process to test the candidates and to explore with the candidates how they best satisfy that definition. So in your example, it would be a matter, I imagine, for the recruitment process to explore with that candidate. And ultimately, if they have a candidate they believe is capable, they would make a recommendation. That's my understanding. And I think that subject to anything Jonathan might qualify was the thinking behind the way we've approached inserting this definition.
So I think the question arises, if somebody who is being considered has a second home or another home in another county, would we wish officers and the audit committee to exclude that person from selection? Councillor Heather Williams.
I just want to clarify, obviously the constitutional changes are in Appendix B, but we have got Appendix A, which gives a very big steer to officers. It is the role description for the independent member and does offer extra clarification. I think we would be potentially sort of looking to, if we make changes now onto different things, that could potentially be seeking to overturn the full council decision. So we ought to be careful where we're going through, and I think Appendix A offers enough steer to officers, in my view, so happy to go to a vote, Chair.
That's very helpful. We have a proposal to go to a vote. Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Lena. Thank you. Can we take that vote by affirmation?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so we have therefore recommended to council that the constitution be amended to allow the appointment of an independent person to the Audit and Corporate Governance Committee, subject to the restrictions that we've discussed. I'd then like to move on to the 50th anniversary of the council. This council was established following the Local Government Act, on the 1st of April 1974, by the merger, of course, of the then South Cambs Rural District Council and the Chesterton Rural District Council. We are not alone in having been established on that date, but it seems appropriate to mark the date, or as near as possible we can. Now, on the advice of the Chief Executive, we set up a small working group which met about a week ago, and I think all members have received an email from this is a note written by Catherine Southwood and was sent to members by email on 12th of December. Has everyone received that note of our discussions? I think so. Now, we talked about what the... I'm just going to briefly run through that to highlight some of the key decisions. The purpose of the event would be to celebrate the 50th anniversary. It would be an opportunity to highlight significant developments and events in South Cambs history over the whole of that 50-year period, including the move from the base in Hills Road. And in fact, I think Hills Road wasn't where we were originally established. And at the suggestion of the Chief Executive, we are proposing to commission somebody, or in fact, well, the suggestion it should be Andy Carpen, but I don't know whether he has yet agreed to that, to put together a review of the history of the formation of this council. I will suggest later that we might involve others in that. We had a suggestion from Councillor Susan van der Ven, who's not able to stay with us, that we should involve the local history societies in the parishes and villages, which I think would be a useful suggestion. As to the date, again, on the advice of the Chief Executive, we should avoid any possibility of the pre-election period, and the suggested date, which has been cleared, is the 20th of March, timing early evening. And I believe Democratic Services have now checked that there are no clashes for that date. It's proposed to use this building, that is the street downstairs, and we'll need to review how we arrange that, who we involve in it. This will be a separate event from the proposed opening of the ground floor to local businesses, which is a controversial matter, I'm aware, but is proposed to be launched on the 24th of April. I would appreciate suggestions from the committee and from others as to what we should include in the celebration event. And I'm particularly keen, for instance, to involve, we've chosen the chair's charity, the Camborne Youth Forum. They have, this is a risky suggestion, they have been putting together a number of musical groups. And I think we need to be careful about who we invite to this. I'm being very informal here, but I have recently attended, had the privilege of going to the Haverhill Carol concert. You might say, why is this relevant? They had a superb brass band there. Now, I don't know what we have in this district in terms of competition-winning brass bands or other bands. I'm not very musically aware. Some of us attended a superb Diwali event recently in Camborne. Is it appropriate we should involve them in this? How should we mark this occasion, both on the day of the event and as Susan van der Ven, Councillor Susan van der Ven has suggested, should we organise other events around this to celebrate the event? So I would very much appreciate comments and also the agreement of this committee that, I should mention the proposal for invitations, which is, sorry, it had slipped off my radar, it's down the bottom there. There are what we call the usual suspects, or the chain gang of the chairs, mayors. Leaders are usually not treated as usual suspects, they're invited on their own merits. of various local councils. And I think we should invite them, that they invite me as your chair occasionally to events in their districts and in the county. I'm suggesting we also invite former mayors, and I'm not sure about former mayors, we'll see about that, former chairs of this council, certainly former leaders and senior officers of the local authority since 1974. And also that we invite long-standing former elected members. There's only one member that I'm aware of who was on the council, as it happens, both before on South Cambs Rural District Council and immediately afterwards on the South Cambs Council. That's Councillor Mason, I believe. There may be others. We're doing some research on this. The problem with inviting former long-standing members is what the threshold should be. And it has been suggested to me that we should use the 20-year threshold. Some of the long-standing members will fit in other categories anyway. And so, for instance, people like Councillor Deborah Roberts and other former long-standing councillors would fit in that description. Again, I'd welcome discussion on that. I don't suppose we need to discuss here, budget is just a fact. With the catering, we have existing arrangements, and then at the bottom there is a table suggesting responsibility for the different elements of it. I can't actually read that table on my laptop, but I think that's my fault. It's in. Hopefully other members can read that. See if we can get it up. No. Actually, yes. Right. Let's throw this open to comment and suggestions.
Chair, I was just wondering, is there going to be like a theme?
A theme. Good point. I think the history and development of the district, but maybe we need to develop that theme. Do you have any suggestions, Councillor, as to what the theme might be?
Well, I was just thinking that these occasions, we should try and make them as meaningful as possible.
Yes.
And by that, I mean that, you know, I don't know, in my opinion, we should be celebrating democracy.
Yeah.
We should be celebrating our population, you know, who we are, our residents, the diversity. And I think it's also an opportunity to, I don't know, encourage, we all have different opinions, there's lots of different political parties, all of this, and I think it's kind of an opportunity to promote those values about respect and diversity and equality and all of this. So I think it's an opportunity to make this very meaningful, not just a party.
Yes, I'm speaking personally, I would very much welcome that. I think the themes of democracy, the diversity of this district, and our values of respect, which is a matter that we've discussed in full council and passed motions on, are important themes that we should certainly include in this. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. So I've just been involved in the 90th anniversary of the school I went to. And one thing that was valued from a lot of people that came to visit was we had a display of the history of the school, and we sort of had each decade and a sort of display on each decade. So I think there's probably plenty of things that we've got in archives or old photographs. Yeah, there was that lovely Millennium photograph that used to be up in the mezzanine, what have you. So something like that, which could be in the chamber if we're not using it potentially, or something to that effect, that people could, or have it in the foyer so people could just come and have a look around. And then that could sort of stand for a few days if people wanted to see it.
Yes, I think Councillor Mark Howell and I looked at that photograph the other day, and he was able to identify all the people in it, which I was not.
He doesn't quite look the same in that photograph, does he? Bless him.
And he is actually producing for us a little list of who is in that. But that is one of many things. We have very little in terms of the history of this council in the chamber, or there is a display cabinet at the entrance. And I personally, again speaking personally, I notice the contrast when I enter, for instance, the Guildhall and also other council chambers, that there is not much to mark our history and to show where we've come from. But so I do welcome that suggestion. I mentioned earlier the local, Susan van der Ven's suggestion that we involve the local history societies. Certainly in my own village, we have two local history societies in Stapleford and Great Shelford. I'm sure others here could mention that perhaps we'll do so. And I think we'd all welcome suggestions subsequently on that. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. So I think the idea of the theme's nice. I think there's some risk about this being very, very retrospective, though. And bearing in mind that as a council, we've recently had a task and finish group on young people. And, I would like to see our focus being the next 50 years. So 50 years ago, there was no political parties in this council. Everybody was an independent. So, it is radically different. You never know. It might, another 50 years, it might end up back in that position. So I'd like to suggest that, part of the theme is the next 50 years, and perhaps we hang that on something like a photographic competition for young people about, what would the next 50 years look like? Where are we going? Where's the evidence in South Cambridgeshire of, of the direction of travel for the next 50 years, and use this as a means of encouraging more young people to get involved in local government. So I think let's be forward-looking, not just make this a big historical, backward-looking exercise, which will, it'll be interesting for some of us, but it's not going to grab the attention of the next generation of people who will be sitting in this chamber.
Yes, I think that's very important. We did, after all, have the working group, the task and finish group on that, and there is ongoing work in relation to not only the sixth form colleges, but also the village colleges, and how we could connect with, I guess, particularly students who have not just those who are being taught courses in politics, others may have interests too, who don't follow those studies, but this would be an opportunity to take that connection forward and develop it. I mentioned earlier the involvement of the Camborne Youth Forum, but that is only one of many youth forums. We have a lot of very valuable work going on. Romsey Mill and others do a lot of very valuable work, and we should highlight that perhaps. Thank you for that suggestion. Councillor Henry Batchelor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I was actually going to suggest more nostalgia, but I appreciate that might not be... But no, I mean, absolutely support the idea of looking back over the 50 years that this council's been around, and where the council started then and how much it's changed and progressed since then to where we are today. But, absolutely take the point that in another 50 years' time at the centenary of this council, where it may well be then, because we do have a lot of plans in the pipeline to grow South Cambridgeshire and grow this council. So, I think maybe there could be a balance to be struck between the nostalgic side of the celebrations, and also a celebration of where this council, the opportunity this council has to grow further. So just going through some of the suggestions made by the working group, I mean, I think inviting former leaders and potentially chairs of the council, I think would be useful, because everyone loves a story from days gone by. So I think that might be a good idea. But obviously also on the flip side, inviting, trying to engage the youth in the celebrations as well, I think would be a positive thing too. So don't know if that helps or not, but that's
I just observe that I think, Councillor Batchelor, you're more likely to be involved in the 100th year celebrations than I am, but I do work in the school. And others possibly. Yes, I think that's a very good point. Can I just ask members for their views on this suggestion that we, in inviting former members who don't fit into other categories, we use 20 years as the threshold. Came because the county council, I believe, used that for designating aldermen, whereas we don't designate aldermen. Otherwise, we have the danger of somebody feeling that they've been left, somebody's been invited and they haven't. I mean, I'm totally relaxed if additional people who don't necessarily meet the criteria are also invited, but I just think we need to have a threshold. Councillor Heather Williams.
I think we have that threshold, which brings us in parity with what the county does. But at the end of the day, this is going to be an advertised event, and I'm sure of anybody that we've made a specific, effort to represent that 20-year service. But I'm sure other people will joyfully turn up if they feel so inclined.
Yes, I don't envisage Eduardo standing at the doorway asking people if they were only a member for 19 years. Councillor Khan.
It's just a thought in terms of event. We talked about involving the young people music groups, perhaps in Camborne. A number of I know at least two, a councillor and a former councillor who are very interested in music and singing. Former councillor Douglas de Lacy, who was very active in the Choir 2000. And my son is performing in the, Councillor Ariel Khan is performing in the Gertland Musical Theatre. I'm sure there are others. Would it not be a nice idea to have those councillors involved in events to perhaps think about performing something together, or perhaps they could be persuaded to? It's just a thought.
Yes, I think this suggestion of a councillor's choir is perhaps a little dangerous. I certainly wouldn't propose that I should be involved in it. I perhaps just comment one of the great advantages of a brass band rather than an organ, as we found out the other night, is that it completely drowned out the singing, and even people like I were able to belt it out at full volume without any danger of ruining the event. But and I think, to be serious about it, there are some musical groups which may or may not have involvement of particular members, which we should. What we can't do, I think, is invite every musical group in the patch to come up on stage. We need to be very careful about this, and we need to have someone with rather more, perhaps, discernment than I have in myself, involved in the selection process. So, yes, I think that's a good point. Any other groups that we should involve? This is perhaps a very good way of involving younger people, isn't it? I don't know what the average age profile is of the Girton Musical Theatre. One of the problems.
Probably older than the Choir 2000.
We used to, I think it was from the 2012 Olympics, just think of younger people, we used to do a grant for people that were sort of Olympic hopefuls. I know of one who I think still classed as young, early 20s, who actually went on to be European diving champion. So you might want to look at the sport as well as the musical. There may be people that the council has supported that are now doing, extraordinary things.
Yes, I entirely accept that. My problem is that we have a limited budget for this event, and if it's a wider proposal for how the council might sponsor other activities, I think that goes beyond the scope and the budget of this event.
Chair, I was just saying about, we could make something of that cohort of people that receive funding in that sort of 2012 period, and now where they are in their careers. So that would show sort of a way that we could have a display of how the council supported those individuals and what they're going on to do, because that is part of our history. They are part of South Cams. I know we had, there was a couple of people from my ward that received that support, as I'm sure others did as well.
Well, certainly if we could identify people who fit into that category, we should do so. I'm trying to remember where we are with the next Olympics. Can you remind me? Paris next year, isn't it? So it is quite immediate. But I just don't know if there are particular people we could identify. Councillor Smith.
On the music side, could I suggest somebody has a chat with Councillor James Hobrough, who's a very accomplished musician and part of a very highly thought of group of musicians? Because he might be free, in both senses of the word.
Yes, I should say that just informally, I've spoken to Councillor de Lacy also, who made music very much a theme of events organised during his period, which were really the last time we did any civic events. Perhaps we need to put together a small working group of people with a better musical ear than myself to take that forward. I don't know whether officers present have any suggestions. Suggestions from all. I don't see Andrew Francis offering to organise a choir for us, but don't know why. Okay, comments are very welcome. Thank you, members. I think probably that's been a useful discussion of the ideas set out in the working group. And if I may, I suggest we invite that working group to consider it further. Does anyone want to suggest additional people we should involve in the working group? And perhaps we should invite Councillor Hobrough to be involved in the working group. The conversation first and see where it gets to. Yep. Okay. I don't think we need a vote on this item at all. It's just been a useful discussion, and so I propose to move on to the next item, which is the update on the Code of Conduct complaints, item 7. May I ask John Murphy to introduce this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. A very short report for members. If I quickly run through what I've written in the report in the table, and then I've got 2 remarks to make, and then happy to take any questions. So I've just bring to the committee's attention that a matter which I had earlier reported on has now completed, and that was completed after a breach had been proven against the South Cambs councillor. And under the Ethical Handbook Code of Conduct Complaints Procedure, it was closed using the summary resolution procedure. That is a matter in which I gave prior notice to the chair of this committee, and I'm happy that that has come to an appropriate end. I have a number of other matters, South Cambs councillor complaint, where with the consultation of the independent person, we deemed that there was no formal breach, not appropriate for formal investigation, so we closed that matter. I have a currently live complaint against a South Cambs member. I have written in the report, which was written some days ago, that I was awaiting the outcome of the consultation with the independent person. I've now had that, but only in the last 24, 48 hours, and I have not yet communicated my decision to the subject of that complaint. So, with your grace, Chair, I will report to the committee next time when the matter has completed its evolution.
Just confirm you have my support on that. I don't know about my grace, but yeah, please.
Thank you. I've received a number of other complaints regarding parish councils and town councils, which I'm in the process of liaising with parties and awaiting responses. So they're all live. That's all I propose to say on the table in the report. 2 remarks I would make to members is that, firstly, I understand that a member of the public has emailed a number of members of this committee this morning. I wasn't included, but a number of you have brought it to my attention, so thank you. My quick read of that email, and I'm happy to share my view, is the email highlights that under our Ethical Handbook Code of Conduct Complaints Procedure, where a breach is proven, the monitoring officer can make an assessment that the matter is appropriate for summary resolution, which I've already touched upon in my earlier example, or if it's not appropriate for summary resolution, or summary resolution is frustrated by the member who is the subject of the complaint, it would move to a determination hearing. After a determination hearing, the monitoring officer does write a decision notice, and that is published on the council website. So effectively, members of the public would know the name and the details of the proven complaint that goes to a determination hearing. I think the email from the member of the public says, why doesn't that apply to summary resolution? Because the breach has been proven. It is a matter that I'm aware of, and I always keep how we handle our codes of conduct complaints under review. But at this stage, I don't think I can tell you that I'm going to do anything or we're going to have a report, because I'd like to take consultation with other members and officers. But he makes an interesting point, and I will consider it moving forward.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. So can I just clarify that? So I mean, the news this morning has been about an MP who's been named, who's being suspended for 30 days or something like that. So that's been in the news today. So we all know who that person is, and we will have a reasonably good idea of what that person did. So is the practice that we implement here, is that normal practice within local government?
I think the honest answer is other places do things differently. I've had experience elsewhere where I have been the deputy monitoring officer, where they took a more transparent approach to any complaint where a breach was proven. But as I sit here today, obviously I follow the existing South Cams practices and procedures, and I have it in front of me on the laptop, and I'm quite clear that what has been done correctly, but the member of the public has highlighted that there is a distinction that perhaps he can't understand why things have been done differently. And I'm certainly, after this meeting, happy to go away and have a think about the point that has been raised and consult with members and senior officers.
I don't know whether others, Councillor Smith, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, I just would be, I can talk to the LGA about it. I'm just interested to know, what is, is this the most common practice? I just need to know that we're largely in kilter with other authorities, is what I need to know, really.
For what it's worth.
My apologies.
No,
certainly, I'm willing to look elsewhere and bring wider circumstances to bear in terms of how we might move forward.
There are limited circumstances in which the monitoring officer consults me as chair of this committee, but I do not, I often don't know the names, and I do not consult others because that's not provided for. For what it's worth, I think we should be as transparent as we can be, but I also accept that we need to retain an incentive to resolve these matters by agreement, and if that incentive involves the name then being withheld because the matter's been resolved without the need for publicity, then I can see the benefits of that. But I entirely support what you say, Councillor Bridget-Smith, that we should, as far as possible, not only be in line with LGA, but we have tried to be a leading authority, and transparency is one of our values. I think it wasn't one that was mentioned earlier on, but I think it's something we should consider, and we maybe need to consider whether we should invite the monitoring officer to formally review this rather than merely discuss it with us informally at another date. Councillor Smith.
So, I think you make an excellent point there about incentivising resolution. And I think that's really, really important. And I think we also have to be very mindful about mental health and, the reasons why people might deviate. It's not necessarily because people are just bad people. It's because, life's complicated these days, and we must be aware that there can be longer-term serious consequences of any decision we might take about this. So, as I say, my question was just about, are we largely, aligned with other authorities? Is just my question. I'm not requesting reviews or anything. It's just that I'd just be interested in that bit of information.
Okay. Do any other members of the committee want to comment on this before we invite John Murphy to respond? Councillor Khan.
I would simply say that I think it's certainly, like Councillor Smith said, I think very important that we look at other conduct of other authorities, but also looking to see if conduct of other authorities creates problems. I mean, conduct of other authorities might be ubiquitous, but it might also cause problems. And so I think we do need to look at the what common conduct is, and if there are any problems with that common conduct at the same time. That's all I've commented.
Well, John, perhaps you would respond and let us know whether you feel that we need to formally review this or just have further informal discussions about what the procedure might be. Do you want to bring this back to a future meeting of this committee, for instance?
Thank you, Chair. I think as a monitoring officer, I always keep things under review, and I have various comments throughout the year from people suggesting or highlighting issues, and when speaking to senior officers and members, I'm always looking to see if we can improve our procedures. I think if at this stage, Chair, rather than any definite commitment, I just make the comment that I will always keep it under review, and should I find that I've got concrete grounds that I want to invite this committee's comments on, I would liaise with you and bring something to the committee.
Okay, so the views of members on those points are noted, and with that, I would just ask members that we... Sorry, John Murphy.
My apologies. I just have one more short point. It was just to update you, really. You'll see from the table I've got a couple of complaints from parish councils, town councils. I've reached out and made friends with the local association of local councils. Kapalk, as it's often referred to, and at their next training day, where they bring in from far and wide various representatives from parish town councils. It's been suggested I go along and introduce myself. I'm hoping that won't have the effect of increasing the number of people who complain now they know me. Rather, I will bring to their attention and encourage best practice and codes of conduct awareness. So that's just for this committee to note.
Yes, Councillor Khan, yes.
It's been reported that there was a problem, I don't know whether this is the right place to bring it in, but I just asked, maybe you can outline, that there was a case of an assault on an officer here by a member of the public in this building. Perhaps you could give some, would this be the point to clarify what the background to that?
Slightly separate issue, but if you would like to comment on that, would be very helpful.
It's a legal issue.
This is an open,
Okay,
meeting.
fine. Sorry, thank you very much. That's information that I used to know. Okay.
I suspect that
Yes, to all members, I think the matter to which you refer, I think, is currently a hot topic and is probably best not dealt with here whilst it's ongoing, but thank you.
the only other comment I would make is that I know from past experience that we may regard our processes as being confidential, but particularly where parish councils are concerned, in practice, parish councils know exactly what complaints are being considered, and it does throw a shadow over the members concerned, if it is a member who is being considered, particularly when they cannot speak publicly about what is going on, and I think we need to bear that in mind as well. But no need for a response on that. Can I just ask members of the committee that we formally note this report? Affirmation, all agreed, no, not against, thank you. So, item 8, date of next meeting. The next meeting is scheduled to be held on Thursday, 14th of March at 10 a.m. again. Thank you all very much for your attendance and your participation.
Thank you, Chair.
Declare this meeting closed.